Single mom brings her daughter to work, and the CEO's life is transformed by a touching moment. Sarah stood in front of her office building, heart racing. The glass facade loomed like a protective barrier between her and the chaos that waited inside. She had simply run out of options. With her babysitter falling through last minute, there was no choice but to bring 8-year-old Maya. The thought of her daughter wandering through the bustling environment made her stomach twist with unease. This was no place for a shy, anxious child. What if her presence disrupted her already demanding day? As they entered the sleek lobby, Sarah could feel Tom's disapproving gaze as soon as he spotted them. The CEO had expectations, and they didn't include a child in the middle of crucial campaigns. Focus on the client, he often reiterated, a mantra echoing through countless meetings. But how could Sarah focus when Maya clung to her leg, wide-eyed and trembling under the weight of scrutiny from the executives? Navigating her responsibilities felt like a delicate dance, every step threatening to expose her vulnerability. Her mind raced with unanswered emails, looming deadlines, and multiply her worry over Maya's discomfort. Sarah crouched down, her voice caught between desperation and determination. Just a little longer, honey. Can you stay close? Maya nodded, but her grip tightened, as if fearing the world outside her mother's protective grasp. The noise was abrasive, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, muffled conversations blending into a deafening backdrop. As Tom's voice raised an octave in a nearby office discussing a disgruntled client, Sarah felt the pressure building. Striving to drown out the chaos, she wrestled with her own growing anxiety. Every time she glanced at Maya, a fresh wave of guilt washed over her. Was this what being a mother felt like? Did she have to sacrifice one for the other, her love for her daughter versus her commitment to her job? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just then, amid the rising tension of the brainstorming session, something unexpected occurred. Maya, inspired by a burst of creativity from the vibrant advertisements that surrounded her, took a shuddering breath and approached Tom, her fingers fidgeting nervously. Sarah's heart stopped. What if she faltered? What if she made a fool of herself? Yet there Maya stood, hand raised, an idea sprouting from her timid self, yearning to be heard. The room fell silent, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Would Tom dismiss her daughter? Would he laugh? As she hovered at the threshold of horror and pride, the world around her blurred. Tom's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, it felt like time hung suspended. Now he was forced to grapple with not just her daughter's enlightening perspective, but also his own history, and the sacrifices his parents made so he could rise to power. The stakes shifted, and in that moment Sarah realized, as if a heavy door might swing ajar, that this collision of worlds could either break them or bind them in ways she never anticipated. What kind of leadership would prevail? The cutthroat mentality of ambition or the vulnerability of humanity? Would Tom choose to acknowledge Maya's brilliance, risking his corporate edge, or retreat back into the isolation of his ambitions? The undertow of uncertainty pulled at everyone in the room, and as Sarah's mind spun, instinctively pushing toward something more profound, she felt the gravity of their lives about to change forever. The silence hung in the air, thick and pregnant with expectation. Sarah could sense an uncharted territory unfolding before her eyes, where her professional insecurities collided with the stirring hope radiating from her daughter. As she stood there, poised at the edge of the moment, a part of her ached to retreat, to fall back on the safety of routine, to shield Maya from potential disapproval. But another part of her, the part that had fought tooth and nail to balance motherhood and a corporate career, felt emboldened. This was no longer just about her commitment to her job. It was about showing Maya that her voice mattered, that brilliance could come in unexpected shapes, and that courage and vulnerability were vectors of strength rather than weakness. Tom's expression shifted, a flicker of intrigue and hesitation wavering across his features as he looked at Maya, who, despite trembling, held her stance firm. The tension in the room crackled. It was palpable, almost electric. Sarah's own heart raced, not out of dread, but from the exhilaration of witnessing a potentially transformative moment. "Go ahead, sweetie," she whispered encouragingly, nudging the small of her daughter's back gently toward Tom. It felt like an unspoken shift of power. For the first time, Sarah wasn't merely an employee in the shadow of an imposing boss. She was advocating for her daughter, paving a way for both of them. Maya cleared her throat, her voice rising tentatively above the corporate noise. I think we should have big posters with colors for ads," she stammered, her small hands gesturing as she spoke, imbuing a child's innocence into what was normally a collective barrage of stiff corporate jargon. "They should look happy, like when I see the cereal box with the dog. That's how they get people to smile." The room held its breath. For a moment it was as if no one knew how to react. Sarah's chest tightened, their lives intertwining with each word Maya spoke. Tom's mouth opened slightly, and a myriad of emotions passed through his otherwise stoic demeanor. Was he about to reject her idea? Or was there a flicker of acknowledgement kindling in him? "Interesting," he said, almost reluctantly. "That could help us connect with our younger audience." The slight nod of his head felt monumental, as if he was taking a step away from the rigid confines of corporate norms into a more human approach to leadership. In that moment, Sarah realized the power of perspective, the power of looking at the world through the eyes of someone unencumbered by the weight of expectation. There was a depth of insight that could only arise from the innocence of youth, something Tom desperately needed to recognize. As the meeting resumed, Sarah felt lighter, the burdens of guilt being replaced by an emerging sense of empowerment. She glanced at Maya, who was animatedly discussing her ideas, her once timid demeanor now alight with passion. This was more than a chance meeting. It felt like a spark, an awakening. But as the discussion progressed, Sarah couldn't shake the latent tension building in her heart. Had she just initiated change? Or had she unwittingly cast herself into a battle for acceptance within the strict hierarchy of the corporate world? The questions twisted in her mind, a knot of uncertainty and potential conflict. Now that the barrier between professional ambition and personal passion had begun to blur, what ripple effects would that unleash? As she took note of Tom's cautious reaction to Maya's suggestion, a chilling thought gripped her. How would he handle this newfound humanity in the midst of his cutthroat environment? In the shadow of progress lurked the specter of inevitable confrontation. The moment of truth approached, the realization poignant. Confronting the boys' club status quo might demand sacrifices she had yet to consider. Sarah took a deep breath, raising her conviction, fueled by the brilliance of her daughter. The next chapter in her life awaited, but it appeared to come with unforeseen trials, one that would demand bold choices and an unfaltering spirit. Would she have the strength to face this confrontation head-on? As the meeting wound down, Sarah knew that the next challenge loomed larger than the office walls. Would she confront Tom as they both unraveled the meaning of leadership? The weight of the past and the potential of the moment collided, and she could feel the pulse of transformation. It was now up to her to decide how to seize it. As the meeting came to a close, Sarah's mind raced, torn between a sensation of triumph and the gnawing realization of what had just occurred. Tom's acknowledgement of Maya's idea echoed in her mind, creating a formidable ripple across the conference room. She was no longer just a contributor. She had become an advocate not only for her daughter but for herself. This was a significant shift in the dynamic she had long accepted as unchangeable. Yet, her pulse quickened with an unsettling thought. Was she inviting scrutiny by standing against the mildly entrenched norms of the corporate world? Sarah's brow furrowed as she pondered her next steps. She felt the weight of expectation pressing down, not only from her employer but now from the naivety and hope embodied by Maya. As she exited the conference room, pride and anxiety jostled within her. In the hallway, she spotted the glowing poster of their latest campaign. Bright colors met a bored expression, underscoring the very problem Maya had touched upon. This trivial disappointment fueled Sarah's determination. Perhaps they could harness the imagination of youth to breathe fresh life into their stale corporate identity. That evening, as she dozed off, Sarah's mind remained restless. She began crafting a plan, sketching ideas for a presentation that could integrate childlike creativity into their campaign strategies. It was a radical thought, an indirect challenge to the status quo, yet she felt exhilarated by the prospect of stepping into uncharted territory. By presenting these ideas, not only would she be voicing her vision, But she might also champion a different kind of leadership, one that embraced empathy and humanity at its core. The following morning, Sarah woke with resolve. She decided to leverage her newfound confidence and share the seeds of her idea during their next brainstorming session. This time it would be about more than just colorful posters. It would be about reshaping the conversation around creativity in the workplace. As long as she remained silent, others would never grasp the magnitude of change that could come from truly listening both to their clients' children and to each other. Her mind raced with the statistics that supported the need for child-centric advertising, the emotional resonances she'd witnessed in Maya's expression, and the undeniable pull of the market to shift towards authenticity. However, the prospect of delivering her presentation made her stomach churn. What if Tom dismissed it outright? What if her voice was drowned in the same corporate din that had stifled her previously? Even as she prepared her slides, vibrant slogans interlaced with childlike doodles, doubt threatened to tether her enthusiasm. The morning sun streamed through her window, casting brightness upon her desk cluttered with sketches and notes. In that moment, a thought struck her. This preparation was more than a presentation. It was a personal reclamation of authority over her work and her identity. With every stroke of her pencil, she was constructing her own path forward. Later that day, as the brainstorming meeting commenced, Sarah could feel the palpable buzz of uncertainty mixed with anticipation in the room. The expectation hung in the air, mirroring her own internal conflict. Would this moment yield the heft of transformation she was hoping for? As Tom took the floor, Sarah's heart quickened. Questions swelled in her head. Would he recognize the passion behind her efforts? Would he open the door to a conversation that could change everything? The seconds dripped away, adrenaline coursing through her veins. It was now or never her moment to assert her voice and stake her claim to a space where she and Maya could be truly heard. But just as her name was about to be called, a sudden wave of fear swept over her. What if her world didn't align with this new vision she was creating? This was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. Would she have the resilience to brave this confrontation? Swallowing hard, she prepared to step into her role as both an employee and a mother, ready to redefine leadership within this rigid structure. And with that, the doorway to her future opened, revealing the indistinct shadows of both opportunity and challenge. Would she be able to navigate this new landscape? Or would she ultimately falter when facing the ensemble of corporate expectations? As Tom commenced the meeting, Sarah's heart raced, her palms slick with anxiety. The conference room buzzed with the animated discourse about quarterly statistics and marketing strategies. Yet, within this cacophony, she felt distinctly isolated, poised on the precipice of self-expression. Tom's voice reverberated through the air, a steady rhythm of authority. He spoke about driving sales, customer outreach, and new market segments. For a moment, Sarah's focus blurred, caught in an internal tug-of-war. The promises she had made to herself, the commitment to speak out, tugged at her. She knew they needed change, and that change required a bold step. Daring to challenge the status quo wasn't meek. It was audacious. "Let us hear from Sarah," Tom announced suddenly, breaking her reverie. All eyes turned toward her, a collective expectation swelling. This was the cue. It was time to manifest all she had prepared. As she stood, Sarah took a deep breath, suddenly aware of her own heartbeat thrumming against her ribs. She felt the slides flickering behind her, illustrative of concepts that, until now, had laid dormant in her mind. With each word that left her lips, she tried to summon the passion that had been ignited by Maya. What if we infused our advertising with a perspective that resonates with children? She asked, carefully cutting through the corporate monotone. The room fell silent, each pair of eyes fixed on her, evaluating, questioning. It was nerve-wracking, but as the words flowed, so did her confidence. She dared to discuss the potential of creative ideas stemming from youthful imagination, the value of real connections that reflected authenticity. The visuals danced behind her, simple but evocative drawings that encapsulated joy, curiosity, and freedom. But Tom's face remained inscrutable, a mask of corporate judgment. His gaze bore into her, stirring a fresh wave of dread. Would he dismiss her, suffocating this flickering flame of inspiration? The thought was excruciating. As Sarah closed her presentation, she felt exposed, as if she had stripped away layers of carefully constructed professional armor. The room held its breath, the anticipation thick enough to slice through. Then, the moment stretched on, the silence pulling taut until at last, Tom spoke up, his voice neither dismissive nor enthusiastic. "I see where you're going with this, Sarah," he said slowly, weighing her words. "But how do we measure success? How do we know it's worth investing in the journey of childlike creativity?" Unexpectedly, a wave of relief washed over her. He hadn't dismissed her outright. This response felt like an invitation, an opening. Here was an opportunity to bridge her vision with tangible results, to transform that vulnerable moment into a framework for strategic discussion. "Perhaps we could pilot an initiative focused on feedback from children," she suggested, drawing on her earlier insights. "A focus group composed of families who resonate with our brand ethos could guide us, ensuring our campaigns don't just capture attention but create lasting bonds." For the first time, murmurs of agreement flitted across the room. Sarah's pulse steadied, her body relaxing beneath the weight of her suddenly buoyant hope. It transformed into a collective inquiry among her colleagues, sparking dialogue rather than resistance. As the meeting progressed, she found herself riding a wave of collaboration that felt exhilarating yet tenuous. A new path was emerging, but shadows lurked in its wake. What if the focus group initiative fell flat? What if the pulse of the company's culture couldn't adapt to this radical, youthful perspective? Sarah sensed the tug of doubt attempting to infiltrate her newfound courage. She had crossed a line, venturing well beyond the confines of her previous role. Would her next steps be met with equal favor, or was this fleeting moment of acceptance a mere shadow, soon to dissipate? As she glanced around the room, the same faces that once represented her fears now documented her growth. But she could not shake the feeling. She stood at the brink. What awaited her if she pushed further? Would she cultivate this creative landscape, or would reality intercede, quelling the vibrant ideas that had begun to sprout in her mind? Only time would tell. The moment of truth was looming ahead. The days following the meeting buzzed with spirited exchanges. Sarah felt invigorated, yet she remained keenly aware of the precarious balance she now had to maintain. Each day came with new challenges testing her resolve. Ideas that once felt invisible swirled in her mind, as vivid as the color illustration she had presented. Tom assigned her as the primary contact for the pilot initiative. Despite her new responsibilities, doubt lingered. She pored over reports, dissecting past campaigns, scrutinizing what worked and what fell flat. The concern gnawed at her. Was this endeavor rooted in genuine potential, or merely a romantic notion unearthing her desire to rekindle the joy of childhood creativity? The thrill of having a voice battled with a creeping sense of dread. She couldn't brush away. One morning, in the comfort of her new office, Sarah received a call from a family willing to participate in her focus group. As she spoke with them, their passion for authentic engagement and creativity energized her, and she realized that she wasn't just pitching ideas, she was igniting connections. Their enthusiasm resonated within her, and for the first time, Sarah allowed herself to imagine how this initiative could blossom into something significant not only for their company, but also for the families involved. As weeks passed, the focus group gathered momentum. Parents and children shared heartfelt insights, and Sarah meticulously documented their feedback. They told stories of their unfiltered joys, imaginary worlds conjured into being through sheer whimsy. The passion she witnessed was infectious. The children reminded her of unshackled creativity she craved but had buried beneath the weight of expectations. During one session, Sarah requested everyone to draw their favorite characters or places. She moved around the room, watching their tiny hands move eagerly across the paper. Suddenly, a child raised his hand, beaming with a bright idea. What if the characters could talk to each other and make us feel special? The simplicity of his thought hit her with a wave of inspiration. It echoed her earlier proposal that evening. Sarah replayed the session in her mind while filing her notes. However, a haunting worry clouded her excitement. Was she truly capturing the essence of their creativity, or was she packaging it neatly, adhering to corporate norms? In that moment, she resolved to structure her proposal differently, one that didn't dilute the authenticity of the children's insights. In her head, she crafted the framework beyond metrics and projections, cultivating an atmosphere that encapsulated spontaneous imagination, not just following the guidelines dictated by seasoned marketing strategies. By the end of the week, her proposal was complete. With fervor, she approached Tom to present her findings and the framework she envisioned. As she spoke, she poured not just facts and figures, but pictures not just strategies but a narrative. Tom listened intently. His face revealed no hints between skepticism and intrigue. Then he posed the question. Sarah, do you think this can withstand the scrutiny of our board? The numbers matter after all. A flicker of anxiety surged. She had rediscovered her passion amid turbulent waves. But could she articulate the importance of the endeavor to the decision-makers? She needed to anchor her ideas with proof, a tangible connection between the heart and the business's bottom line. As the meeting concluded, Sarah found herself wrestling with a complex realization. She had grown. Her ideas had developed and evolved. But with this growth came fresh scrutiny, and she remained acutely aware of the unpredictable tides threatening to upend her progress. In that moment of reflection, the door opened, and a sudden visitor peeked in. It was Maya, her mentor, with an uncharacteristically serious expression on her face. "We need to talk, Sarah. There's something going on that you must know," she said, drawing Sarah's full attention. A ripple of trepidation coursed through her. What revelation loomed on the horizon? Maya stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with a deliberate slowness, as if the weight of the moment demanded a pause. Sarah's heart raced. She sensed the urgency in her mentor's demeanor. It occurred to her that the walls of her newly polished office had suddenly grown constricting, reeking of expectations that she had aimed to shatter. "Sarah," Maya began, her voice low but steady, "I've been hearing some unsettling things about the board's perspective on your initiative." The air thickened with unspoken tensions. How could anyone undermine the authenticity she had fought so hard to cultivate? "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, forcing the words out as anxiety clawed at her throat. Maya met her gaze directly, an intensity in her eyes that vibrated with concern. "Some board members view your concept as too sentimental, too unmeasurable. They fear it won't deliver the metrics they crave." Sarah's chest tightened, her thoughts spiraling. Could their lack of faith erode everything she had built? She had been trying to breathe life back into creativity, and now it felt like the very air she envisioned was being siphoned away. "What should I do?" she pressed, revealing her vulnerability, her quest for guidance in an unstable territory. Maya leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "You need to gather data. Make this initiative bulletproof. Use their language against them. Tie the emotional aspects to hard numbers. Show them how genuine engagement translates to profits, brand loyalty, anything that keeps your vision intact." The suggestion hung heavily in the air, and an internal struggle shook Sarah. This was the moment where her ideals clashed with the real world. The prospect of compromising her vision darkened her resolve, but the instinct to push forward, to validate her beliefs with undeniable facts, glimmered at the edges. Determined, she nodded, the fire of ambition igniting within her once more. She had spent too long regarding creativity as a mere offset to profit, a luxury, rather than an intrinsic driver of success. As Maya departed, Sarah's mind turned furiously to strategizing her next steps. Over the next few days, Sarah poured herself into gathering data, scrutinizing her notes from the focus groups through the lens of cold analyses. Each child's joy became a data point. Every parent's enthusiasm, a metric of worth. The stories, once purely heartfelt, morphed into potential case studies, mini narratives shaped by the pulse of monetary value. Tonight, she stayed late in the office, fueled by coffee and resolve, reshaping her proposal into a blend of art and numbers. With every graph and chart, she leaned deeper into the duality of her mission. But the more she worked, the more the shadow of self-doubt whispered to her. Was she losing the soul of the project in this pursuit? Would the children's unfiltered creativity endure the rationality she was forcing upon it? Each reflection pierced her heart. She had set out to cultivate imagination, not to bury it beneath the weight of corporate jargon. Yet, she knew she couldn't abandon the urgency that devoured her. Decision time was looming, and the board's scrutiny would soon wash over her initiative like a tide. On the eve of the presentation, Sarah stood alone in her office, grappling with a painful realization. This was not just about the project anymore, it was about her. Could she reconcile her passion with a world focused on profits? How could she communicate the depth of creativity without becoming a vessel for what was merely sellable? Then, as if in answer, a memory surfaced, the child who had asked if characters could talk to make them feel special. It was an insight wrapped in simplicity, a reminder that creativity delivers feelings people crave more than they realize. With newfound clarity, she made a decision. Tomorrow she would present not just numbers, but stories, woven in a way that allowed her audience to feel the children's wonder. In tandem, she would illustrate how these connections could translate into loyalty, an emotional investment tethered to financial growth. But ahead of her stood a daunting challenge. Could she truly present her approach without holding back, claiming both the heart and the numbers, forging unity? The next day loomed with palpable tension, and as she gathered her materials, the question blazed within. Was she ready to face not just the board, but her own conflicting passions? The morning light broke through the office windows, illuminating Sarah's meticulous arrangement of charts and heartfelt narratives. She stood before her presentation materials, her mind a cacophony of self-doubt mixed with a relentless determination. Today wasn't just another meeting, it was her crucible. As she made her way into the sleek conference room, the sight of the board members settled around the polished table sent a jolt through her stomach. They looked expectant, some flipping through their papers, others whispering amongst themselves. After years of being a cog in a machine, today felt different. Today she was both the creator and the advocate for a vision that came from her heart. Taking a deep breath, Sarah cleared her throat. "Thank you for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on our initiative." She felt the weight of their gazes, some skeptical, others neutral. She couldn't afford stumbles. As she started presenting the data, she noticed their expressions shifting slightly. The initial jadedness began to fade as she integrated hard metrics with the stories she had gathered, the delight in children's eyes as they engaged with the program, the heartfelt responses from parents advocating for its value. Engagement isn't just a number. It's the lifeblood of our brand, she declared, her voice growing stronger. When a child identifies with a character, they don't just connect, they remember. They invest emotionally. That investment translates to our bottom line. Each phrase was a shot aimed at the heart of their skepticism. A few heads nodded, but the skepticism hadn't fully disappeared. One board member, a particularly stern figure, interjected with a pointed question: how do we measure feelings? What can we quantify to assure investors of success? The challenge hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Sarah felt the pulse of fear quicken within her. Yet, it was the very moment she'd been preparing for. What I've brought today isn't just about numbers. It's about reshaping our narrative. We can deploy sentiment analysis tools to gauge emotional responses across platforms that will inform our strategies. She paused, allowing the concept to settle in. With a quiet confidence, she discussed potential metrics for social media engagement tied to campaign sentiment, pointing to case studies of brands that successfully thrived by connecting emotionally with their audiences. And ultimately, she continued, when families feel a personal connection, they become advocates beyond simple consumers. That's the essence of loyalty. Then she took a risk. In her closing, she decided to share a story that could evoke that very emotional resonance she had discussed. It was the story of a single mother who had once brought her daughter to work. Using the program, the child created a character that turned her mother's stress into a lively, anecdotal comic that brought laughter to both their lives. Sarah painted a picture of transformation, how storytelling had empowered that little girl, and how it could empower countless others. A silence enveloped the room. She could feel the board shifting in their seats, some exchanging glances. "Your initiative proposed authentic connections," Sarah concluded. "It allows us to sell more than just products. We're selling experiences rooted in our humanity. That is our competitive edge." As she stepped back from the podium, she felt a strange mix of exhilaration and vulnerability. The tension was palpable, the board members seemingly in debate amongst themselves. And just like that, the walls of doubt that had pressed upon her during her preparation began to dissolve. But before they could speak, she glanced around the room, her heart pounding in her ears. Would they embrace this vision, or would they reject the very essence she fought so hard to preserve? Then the silence shattered with the harsh ring of the board chair's gavel. "Let us deliberate," he stated, leaning back in his chair. But Sarah could see the curiosity, perhaps a hint of respect, in the eyes peering back at her. In that gripping moment, she knew she was at the brink of a pivotal change. Yet, she also felt a swirling vortex of uncertainty resurface. Had she truly made her case, or had she merely scratched the surface? As her pulse raced, She silently prayed for a sign that she had indeed bridged the gap between creativity and commerce. Could she stand firm even if the verdict turned against her, holding true to her values? The air thickened with tension as the board members began to speak, but before she could process their reactions, a young intern appeared at the door, a hesitant expression on her face, a stack of papers in her hands. "Excuse me," she stammered, catching everyone's attention. "I think you might want to see this." The room froze as the intern clutched the documents tightly, her wide eyes darting around, filled with an urgency that made the air around them feel heavier. Sarah's heart raced. What could possibly be so important that it interrupted the moment she had painstakingly crafted? A mixture of curiosity and dread settled in her stomach. Had she miscalculated the timing of her presentation, only to be overshadowed by something unexpected? The board members shifted their attention, their interest peaked. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this could either be a distraction or an unforeseen opportunity, a chance to add weight to her argument or derail it completely. She fought to suppress the rising tide of anxiety, reminding herself that she had already faced larger challenges. "Go on," the board chair urged, his voice calm but authoritative. The intern took a deep breath and unfolded the top sheet, her hands trembling slightly. "This is a new study we just received from the marketing team," she explained, glancing nervously at Sarah. "It details the emotional engagement metrics from our latest campaign. And the reports show that the storytelling approach has resonated powerfully with our audience. Apparently, the recent testimonials from parents and children have spiked by 60%. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The very data she had been advocating for was unfolding before her eyes, potentially reinforcing her argument. She saw heads turning, eyes brightening. These were the statistics that could validate her belief, her passion, and perhaps counter the initial skepticism. "Not only that," the intern continued, "but our social media engagement has shot up significantly. Families are sharing their experiences and creating their own content revolving around the characters. This has resulted in a 25% increase in our program signups and a huge lift in brand loyalty metrics." As she processed this information, Sarah felt a shift within herself. The doubts that had been gnawing at her receded slightly, nudged aside by a flicker of hope. This was tangible proof that her vision was not just theoretical, it was a reality in motion. "Maybe," she mused out loud, her voice gaining confidence, "this data supports the idea that what we're offering is more than just products. It's a community, a narrative that families want to be a part of." The board's demeanor shifted palpably. Interest morphed into eagerness as discussions flickered among them. Sarah sensed the tide was turning, but she also knew better than to become complacent. She needed to capitalize on this momentum, to reach deeper within herself and harness the fire ignited by that unanticipated presentation. "Can we build upon this data?" Sarah ventured, stepping forward, emboldened by the intern's findings. "What if we designed a targeted campaign that highlights these emotional connections? We can integrate feedback loops where customers can voice their stories, making them feel even more valued. It will not only enhance engagement, it will create brand ambassadors in our audience." A wave of thoughtful nods surged around the table. The board was grappling with the implications of what Sarah proposed. As they began debating her ideas, she tucked deeper into her own thoughts. This was the moment when she could not only prove her professional acumen, but also solidify her place as a visionary leader. Yet even amid the growing acceptance, shadows of her initial doubts lingered. Would this momentum sustain once the data dust settled? Was she, at her core, ready for this mantle of leader, or would she falter under the weight of her newfound role? As conversations continued, Sarah was at a pivotal junction, not just as a presenter, but as a creator of change within the organization. She felt the stirrings of self-discovery. This was not merely about presenting findings. It was about becoming an architect of narratives that aligned with her core values. Suddenly, a board member leaned forward, a speculative glance crossing his face. "What will you do next if we decide to move forward?" The question hung in the air, brimming with challenge and opportunity. Sarah realized it was not just about the presentation anymore. It was about charting a new course for herself and the company. "Next," she responded, meeting his gaze with newfound determination, "I will embrace this vision and ensure it permeates every aspect of our strategy. I will make our narratives resonate at an even deeper level." The moment crackled with an energy Sarah had always sought, yet now felt bewilderingly close. With her next steps unfolding like a roadmap, she sensed that her journey had just begun. But amidst the exhilaration, a question echoed in the recesses of her mind. Was she truly ready to lead? Or was she merely riding the wave of temporary enthusiasm? Only time would tell if she would rise to the occasion or succumb to her insecurities. As she prepared to engage the board further, the weight of her truth loomed, and the fight for her vision was just beginning. "Let us see where this takes us," she declared. Yet within her lingered the unsettling realization that every journey carries risks, some that could threaten the very fabric of who she was becoming. The atmosphere shifted within the conference room as the discussions subsided, each board member lost in their thoughts. Sarah had effectively captured the room's attention, and the internal monologue she'd been wrestling with only intensified. She could feel a mixture of exhilaration and apprehension swirling inside her. She surveyed their expressions: curiosity, hope, strategic deliberation. She recognized that she was on the precipice of change, not only for the company but for herself. This was her moment, perhaps the defining moment that tested the limits of her capabilities and resolve. Yet, with possibility came pressure, and she sensed the weight of expectation, both external and within. "Sarah," the board chair said, drawing her back to the present, "we appreciate your pitch and the enthusiasm behind it. But how do we know this isn't just a fleeting trend? What's your plan for ensuring sustained engagement?" His question wasn't a roadblock but a challenge, a test for the vision she was trying to forge. Sarah felt the weight of his scrutiny, and in that instant her mind raced. How could she frame her ideas convincingly enough to transform reduction skeptics into advocates? She had to dig deep and translate her vision into actionable steps. "Firstly, we need to create a feedback ecosystem," she proposed, her tone growing steadier. "The testimonials we've seen are just the beginning. If we develop mechanisms for ongoing interaction, such as surveys and story highlights on social media, we can maintain a dynamic connection with our audience." Encouraged by the nods of agreement, she pressed on. "We also need to leverage influencers within our community, families who already resonate with our brand, to share their stories authentically. Their voices carry weight, they create organic reach that traditional methods simply cannot achieve, and they help keep our community engaged." She could see the gears turning in their heads, enthusiasm visibly seeping back into the atmosphere. The chair's eyebrow arched in intrigue. However, with every advancement in her argument, her inner critic flared. Was she positioning herself as a visionary leader or merely playing a facade? Who was she trying to prove herself to, herself or the board? "Time is of the essence," her thoughts interjected. "You need to act decisively." Feeling the urgency wrap around her like a tangible force, Sarah shifted her focus back toward the board. "If we move quickly and efficiently, I believe we can solidify our place as not just market leaders, but as a brand that genuinely cares." The energy in the room was electric, tensions beginning to ease as thoughts transformed into determination. The discussions evolved into expressions of shared commitment, an unspoken collaboration forming within the walls of the conference room. Yet Sarah felt a rising tide of uncertainty. Just then, an unexpected voice broke the conversation. "But what if we fail, Sarah? What if this engagement drops off and we end up in a worse position than we started?" It was Jenna, the company's chief financial officer, and her skepticism lingered in the air like a dark cloud. "Exactly the kind of thought I have been grappling with," Sarah admitted, her honesty drawing the room's attention back to her. "And that fear can either paralyze us or propel us to innovate. I choose the latter. By embracing the risk of engagement, we can define how we approach the market. We'll learn, adapt, and grow. Failure is not an endpoint, it's a stepping stone." For the first time, Sarah felt the strength of her own convictions echoing throughout her words. Her pulse quickened, a surge of adrenaline pumped through her as she realized that her path was not merely about the visualization of strategies, but the personal upheaval of doubt from a leader still emerging. "Are we willing to be bold in a landscape that is ever evolving?" she challenged, locking eyes with Jenna and then sweeping her gaze around the board. "Will we allow fear to dictate our future? Or will we embrace it and shape our narrative?" Silence followed her words, thick and heavy, and Sarah could feel her heart racing. This was the moment she had strived for. It was one thing to present ideas but another to galvanize a room full of seasoned professionals. Suddenly, the tension broke at Jenna's softening expression, and a shared realization began to dawn on the board. Sarah knew this was only the beginning of her battle against uncertainty, yet she was ready to accept the challenge. And as discussions resumed with newfound fervor, a question echoed in her mind, amplifying her resolve. What would it truly take for her to prove not just her vision and capabilities, but to justify her worth as a leader committed to effecting real change? The pivot she was seeking wasn't solely in the boardroom. It was leading a narrative she was finally willing to fight for. Refill the coffee, sharpen the pencils, because another meeting was looming, and this time, it would be about determining the true cost of ambition. With the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of change. Her focus group initiative launched successfully, and the overwhelmingly positive feedback flooded in. Parents and children alike were eager to share their stories, their creative ideas igniting a fire beneath the corporate strategies that had long felt stagnant. Each testimonial was a testament to the transformative power of empathy, resonating with Sarah's core belief that a brand could bridge the gap between commerce and genuine human connection. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The board's initial enthusiasm turned into skepticism as they sought evidence of profitability. The crunch had come, a pressure cooker of expectations, and Sarah felt the weight of their gaze as if it were a physical force. She returned to their conversations, flipping through their data, piecing together the narratives that now danced vividly in her mind during one particularly intense meeting. As Tom laid out the numbers in stark contrast to the emotional narratives Sarah had presented, she sensed the tide beginning to shift once again. This time, however, a quiet confidence surged within her. Stepping forward, she could feel her voice cutting through the cold statistics that seemed to suffocate creativity. Empathy can drive profitability, she asserted, remembering the hesitant child whose idea had ignited this entire journey. Our consumers crave authenticity, and when we align ourselves with their visions, our products become extensions of their lives. The numbers will follow. With purposeful clarity, she dissected recent campaigns that had successfully bridged the emotional landscape with strategic advertising, linking brand loyalty to the heartfelt connections they had fostered with family audiences. As she spoke, Sarah's voice grew stronger. She could see the hints of intrigue forming on the board members' faces, a flicker igniting hope in the dim conference room. The breakthrough came during a focused discussion about integrating her findings into upcoming campaigns. Let us pilot a new approach, she suggested, her heart racing with the opportunity. We can develop a series of interactive workshops with children and families, curate their voices into our strategies. Instead of us dictating their experience, let us hand them the brush and let them paint their stories. A ripple of excitement swept through the room, igniting discussions about relatability and impact, empowering the very demographic they sought to engage. Without pretension, this was Sarah's rallying call. Commitments began to echo around the room. Ideas flowed as her colleagues brainstormed alongside her. It was during that strategic session that Tom, normally reserved in motion to take charge, finally paused to give Sarah the attention she had longed for. You've clearly demonstrated that there's merit here, Sarah, he stated, acknowledging her steadfast approach. Should the initiative prove successful, I can't ignore the impact it could have on our bottom line. Those words echoed within her, dramatizing the bridge she had crossed from employee to leader. An award-winning campaign would soon materialize, one that celebrated community voices, showcasing the collaboration she had cultivated. Sarah's heart swelled with pride, not just for the potential accolades but for the journey she and Maya had taken, now intertwined in a mission that honored creativity. As the weeks progressed, the pilot program rolled out. Results began to transform from anecdotal stories to tangible outcomes. Families engaged with the brand on social media platforms, sharing their art and ideas, rallying around a shared ethos. Metrics soared, engagement climbed, and voices that had once seemed trivial were now woven into the fabric of the company's identity. The next board meeting, Sarah stood before her peers, now transformed from a hesitant advocate to a confident leader, carrying stories backing her findings. We've cultivated connections that matter, she proclaimed, watching as nods of agreement spread slowly around the room. Let us harness this momentum and create a legacy of creativity that reverberates through generations. The acknowledgement she gained from the board, the acceptance of the vision she had fought for, translated directly into her elevation. As Tom declared her efforts integral to the company's new strategic direction, Sarah could hardly contain her elation. She had not only reshaped her professional trajectory, she had rebuilt her identity and the wake of her success. The ultimate satisfaction came from Maya's pride. During a weekend outing beneath a canopy of stars, Sarah glanced down at her daughter. "You helped change a lot of things for me," she confessed, a smile breaking across her face. Maya beamed. "I always knew you could, Mommy." That simple exchange sparked a sense of fulfillment as genuine as any recognition from the boardroom. In a short span, Sarah learned a pivotal truth: the convergence of business and humanity could reshape industries. She demonstrated that voices from genuinely creative minds, regardless of age, could drive progress and prosperity. Hannah had emerged not merely as an employee, but as a recognized leader, the architect of transformative change. Life erupted into the undeniable allure of understanding and connection, manifesting a narrative of flourishing empowerment she would carry forward as both a mother and a visionary within the evolving corporate landscape. Now, as the dust settled around Sarah's journey, the landscape before her was rich with possibility. It was time to share her story and inspire others. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to the channel for more exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this remarkable conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative journey.